Hello, everybody.
Hi
This
guys.
is MMT and the Public Purpose, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone, of course, and I'm here with Lisa Theobald, who is your other host, of course. And our guest for tonight is Professor Mathew Forstater of the Department of Economics at the University of um, 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 often have trouble with the M's. Okay. Anyway, but it is Missouri at Kansas City, and he is also the director of research at the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity, which is at Denison University in Ohio. Okay. Before this stream, I was lucky enough to have a chat with with Matt, which occurred last week. It will probably be published this Sunday, okay, at 10 o'clock. That was a beautiful chat, okay, that we had. So I urge you to look out for that one as well. Our topic for tonight is the policy reactions that Matt had to the IPCC Adaptation Report. In other words, the policy agenda that he conceives would be the best one to pass in order to cope with the situation that is outlined by the IPCC report. Okay, this is part 7, okay, of a series where we have interviewed, okay, a number, okay, of MMTers, and they each have given us their views on this subject. And while there's some commonality, everybody has a different twist on this. And I'm sure Matt has a very different twist. The reason being because Matt has an extremely broad background in the social sciences and has been studying sustainability in particular for a very, very long time. I think since the 1990s at least, right? And maybe before that, Matt.
Yeah, even before, really. Yeah, in the 80s as an undergrad, and thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Okay, so you've been involved then in sustainability studies since the very early days, like the limits to growth studies, and
Right. Yes,
absolutely.
absolutely. And actually, a week after I graduated high school, I moved to a homestead, which was a homesteading school where we were growing organic food. This is 1979. Building solar, renewable shelters, and trying to be as self-sufficient as possible. And I decided to do that rather than, I didn't actually take my first college course until I was almost 22, which now it sounds young, but I was a first year student when most of my friends who I graduated high school around the same time were, I guess, who went to college, were graduating college. And so anyway, that homestead school was 11 miles from 3 Mile Island, where there was this nuclear plant accident in 1979. And I had this epiphany that even if you could create a kind of, communal utopia somewhere, right, that you still had to deal with the rest of the world, that we're interdependent. The radiation was not going to stop at the gate of the utopian commune. And
Right.
so I realized that, all of the motivations that, moved me in that direction really required me to go back out into the world and try to deal with some of these problems in, whatever way I could maybe contribute a little bit. And in my case, it's has meant, for the most part, devoting myself to education. And when I was younger, I always felt that education had one of the greatest potentials for nonviolent social change, but that it takes so long. But now that I'm older, I realize that over a 20, 30, 40-year career, teaching hundreds of students a year, and fortunate enough to be in a department that has a master's degree and a doctoral program, supervising students, and then they go out and work for governments or agencies, or teach themselves, publish, go to conferences. You can see change happening. And so, yeah, even in the face of such overwhelming daily onslaughts of the most horrific kinds of news, including concerning the environment, we still have hope. We still have hope. So, I learned so much from studying the African American freedom struggle, and how, the role that hope in the face of unthinkable adversities is part of leaving a record of change and positive transformation behind. And so we're all fighting the good fight. I think we would agree.
Yes, I think we are. Well, I guess we should get to the adaptation report, right? Okay, and your reaction to it from the point of view of the MMT lens and the policies that you would like to see enacted.
So I don't think that there's really anything where we would change very much from what we've been proposing, and I can talk about that in a second. But I think what we get from the most recent report is confirmation once again of things that we have known and feared, and also for my own part, it kind of reconfirms my feeling that when it gets into not just questions of how to pay for a huge program like a Green New Deal kind of a thing, But actually, in sort of real terms, what needs to happen to move on to a sustainable path that that really, in a way, going a little bit back to my roots of the homesteading experiment, that for a long time I have felt that more local, decentralized communities that are working in a cooperation kind of regionally, and with many of the kind of new directions, new old directions, or a revival of kind of going back to the earth and what we can learn from the rest of the natural world about how to live in nature, and to respect and recognize the dignity of all life, other human beings and other species, and sentient, even insentient, you know, beauties that are also such an important part of sustaining life. And so I think things like agricultural restoration and the rewilding and bioregionalism, permaculture, I mean, these are all things that I've been talking about once we get out of the big sort of bumper sticker level MMT and the environment kinds of ideas. But yes, I mean, from the very beginning, once I had a handle on what would become modern money theory, I immediately saw the implications for environmental justice, social justice, and progressive political goals, and so on, and started to explore. And so, like, some of my earliest papers were on the implications of MMT for environmental sustainability, and also on issues of, mostly in my case, race, but also gender and other important areas. And we were talking just before we started off air about my colleague at the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity, Fadl Kaboub, and how, I mean, his doctoral dissertation, which was the first I served as supervisor for, was using the case of Tunisia and examining what a job guarantee program could look like. But it wasn't just about a job guarantee for this country, Tunisia. It was about whether and how modern money theory could apply to the global South, let's say, right? And so this has been a problem historically in economics and other fields generally, of having a kind of cookie cutter approach where we just take the framework that has been developed, say, for a European country or the US, for industrialized nations, for the former colonizing countries, and applying those without any thought about the unique historical circumstances of nations of Africa and Latin America and Southern Asia, especially, right? So that's been another area. And of course, when it comes to the environment, it also, that relationship, the fact that you can't understand the global north and the global south independently of their historical, political, economic relationship to one another, these two sets of countries, right? So we really, I think, those of us in, the US and in, relatively privileged positions, we need to use our privilege to fight for, true social and environmental justice. And so, in any case, in terms of MMT and the environment, a few of the possibilities that immediately came to mind, and I think these would be like back in working paper of mine in 1997 or something like that, that public sector activities are not for profit. And so these activities are not subject to market competition, those pressures caused by capitalist competition. And private firms are compelled by these competitive pressures to choose, say, the least cost method of production, even if that means more pollution or more extracting of exhaustible resources and using them up faster, right? But government, almost by definition, is not for profit, and therefore decisions like what methods of production we should use and whether we should use exhaustible resources or not, those can be made with regard to broader social, macroeconomic, and environmental goals.
Right.
And that gives the public sector a tremendous amount of flexibility and discretion that private sector firms do not have, and it would entail significant regulation and so on in order to bring those companies into line, which, of course, it's not an either or, it's a both and, in my view. We need all kinds of important, regulations, but at the same time, the idea of a job guarantee that could address the problem that brings so much misery to individuals, families, and communities, unemployment,
Mm-hmm.
that issue could be addressed. And at the same time, we could actually, instead of increasing environmental degradation by government-sponsored economic activity, we can actually enhance the environment and promote sustainability by designing the job guarantee activities so that they do not pollute or pollute less, and do not use exhaustible resources, fossil fuels, or very little. I mean, you have almost pure services that use almost no resources and don't pollute at all. And we of course thinking a lot about the care communities, broadly speaking, and such a tremendous need for care of children and the elderly and people who are physically unwell or who are otherwise unwell, or whatever, right? So, but it's only limited by the imagination. So libraries and so many areas where, so those kinds of, and then of course there's the whole sort of section of the job guarantee program. I, in my earlier work 20 years ago, I used to call it the Green Job Corps, which is why I got so unbelievably excited when I first saw the kids from the Sunrise Movement standing in front of Nancy Pelosi's office holding up signs that said "Green Jobs for All."
Yeah.
I mean, you can't
Yeah.
imagine, so I mean, you have to understand, like, someone like me does not ever get to see, like, their ideas actually taken
Embrace.
seriously.
Embrace.
I mean, forget that, people never heard of my university, including myself before I came out, really. So, usually you're only invited if you're from an Ivy League school or, Stanford or whatever, or that my degree is not from one of those schools, and so on and so forth. My publications are not in the American Economic Review. And, I mean, I majored in African American studies as an undergraduate. I followed my heart, really. I had the support to be able to do that, and everything's worked out wonderfully for me. And so, I mean, the job guarantee program, some of these activities like a green jobs core can actually be, planting trees, cleaning up the environment, and providing all kinds of help with environmental education, with research. Even sometimes it's just collecting water samples or whatever. I mean, there's so many things that that we can do, and we have the the potential labor, right, to do this work. And a lot of times, people will ask me, how do you define a green job? And I think it's kind of important because everybody, all these articles talk about green jobs. They're all defining these terms, differently. And it's
Yes.
such a broad
So
term.
let me ask you something about that. That's well, in a way, it gets MMT related. Okay, in the work, of Warren Mosler, when he talks about the job guarantee, he emphasizes very much that that's likely to be a transition job. But in your work with respect to green jobs, you emphasize the green part of it, okay, and not the transition part of it. And I somehow have the feeling that the kinds of green jobs that you'd specify would not necessarily be transitional in any essential sense.
Right. So it is a big issue, and it's one that we really struggle a lot with early on. In fact, that working paper I mentioned, the title was Selective Use of Discretionary Public Employment and Economic Flexibility. So the selective use and the discretionary. So in the paper, I even talk about that. Yes, I mean, the additional issue to what you've mentioned already is that what is considered temporary or permanent, or what activities should be temporary or permanent, changes over time. So something that we may have thought it's okay to be temporary, it's not, it's something we'd like to have, but we could live without it, kind of a thing. My feeling always was from the beginning that once people saw what the results of the program could be in a positive sense, that they wouldn't want to have many of these activities be temporary. Right?
That's what I think.
Yeah. So actually, this was taken up a lot of issues during World War II, and actually one of our students that probably a lot of your viewers might know him, Sam Levy, who is on Twitter as a deficit owl, really brilliant young man who has a couple papers now on kind of the lessons of the mobilization economy, right? So all these things that we can learn from how the U.S. economy was managed by the government during the Second World War. Only, we don't have to do it just for military conflict. We could do it for sustainability and social justice and free medical care and so on, right? So that's really, I think, in a way, the kind of attitude that we have to be taking now is, it always amazed so many of us, even before MMT, that when there's a national emergency, then usually it's war, but okay, sometimes maybe natural disaster. Suddenly the funds, it's no problem, right? I mean, so it depends on what one considers to be an emergency.
Right.
If we consider the healthcare situation or the education situation, in the United States as an emergency, which I think many people would, then we can make the resources available, to address those things. And likewise, go straight down the list, right? So, right.
It shouldn't even be, it shouldn't have to get to a point of an emergency. I see this as a set of priorities, okay?
Right.
Which we don't seem to have the appropriate set of priorities from a lack of political will.
Right.
That's what I struggle with. It's almost like, if you were doing any objective in any corporation or the government or in any school with any curriculum or any endeavor you're going to set upon, you have a list of priorities and objectives and a sequence for which to do them in, right? And you have to buy in to do that, okay? But you're absolutely right. Even using the word emergency, right? Because that's how we function now. It's reactionary. And we cannot continue to be reactionary, because being reactionary in and of itself is not sustainable.
Absolutely. And there's many great examples, but the environment is one, because if we don't see, like what you're describing, Lisa, is if we don't see the effect immediately, then we kick the can down the road, right?
Yeah.
And with the environment, like, we have to be able to expand our vision to include, not just today and tomorrow, not just next year, next decade, next century. We have to be able to kind of be thinking far into the future. And what we are, how we're behaving now has, potentially, as the report was saying, irreversible.
So in that, right, just to put this all in perspective, part of the reason why we have no objectives or goals or, the desired leadership or political will is because of the way that politicians have to cycle through their election cycles and who funds them, right? So we're down to what Joe and I both believe is our fundamental issue here, which is we have to get leadership in place that understands that leadership is not about just fundraising money and talking out of both sides of your mouth. You have to be a leader. You have to be intellectual. You have to have objectives. You have to surround yourself with people who have game plans that I just don't understand it. It's like you have to select the curriculum. What we're not even close to that right now.
Right. Institutional innovations, right?
Yes.
There are things we can do. It's just like with, diversity and inclusiveness. I mean, yes, we can make a set of rules, and those rules will lead to the outcomes that we would like to achieve.
And we have to figure out, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, please.
The diplomacy element of this is rarely mentioned, but we can't do this by ourselves. And I think that everybody knows it, but the lockstep functioning is so backwards that
Right. Well, I think
to speak about
yeah,
the international aspect, okay, diplomatic aspect of things.
right.
Not too long ago, what I did was write an ebook about, it's called Who Needs Balanced Trade? Who Needs a Balanced Budget? And the
Right.
point of the book was to show that there was a relationship between our domestic economic policies and our foreign policies. And not simply our domestic economic policies, but our policies for the public purpose as defined inside of a domestic context, and the policies for public purpose that we should follow, okay, in foreign policy. And the book is a long argument for the integration of the two, using the concept of the public purpose as a guide to integrate, okay, the two things. And I don't think that argument had been put by any of the MMTers before. At least I'd never seen it. And so I wrote this book to put forward that argument in the first place. Don't know how many people noticed it, in the MMT field, but at one of the conferences, Stephanie was asked the question, well, what are some of the books that have been written, about MMT? And she mentioned about 4 books, okay, and my book was one of the 4, which of course made me very happy. But
nice.
But the point is that, to me, that's a dimension of MMT thought which is not at all fully developed, and that kind of dimension is essential for meeting of the climate emergency. Because the climate emergency, of course, transcends our international transactions with other nations, but also domestic policy. And somehow we have to fit these two together to make our contribution to solve the climate emergency. And right now, we're not doing that, at all. That's not part of our policy response, At this time, our foreign policy is completely at variance with what we have to do to support the climate emergency. The very act of motivating and then getting involved, in the Ukraine war with Russia, just totally opposed to what we have to do in the climate area. And even though, of course, Putin started that war in the technical sense, I think it's very correct when you look at the historical record and our own foreign policy record over 20 years, that we were actually the motivators of that response from the Russians. One can argue, I think, that they could have responded, in some different way, and there were other alternatives. But I really think that's a tough argument because their national security was threatened by the various things, that we were doing. And I have to apologize here because I can do nothing about this burst of fireworks going on outside of the apartment.
It's okay. We can't hear it too bad. It's not too disruptive, Joe.
Okay, good.
Well, I
That's
think
right.
what you're alluding to, Joe, that political borders are ignored by the economy and the
And by the
ecology.
climate.
And the climate, yes.
So international agreements and international cooperation at the very minimum. Now, I'm a big supporter of the United Nations. However, I, am in agreement with those who have long argued that it needs to be reformed.
Mhm.
And one thing is the makeup of the Security Council and the, permanent members, the vetoes, it's just no. Okay. We need, and the other aspect, which I've seen discussed a little bit about, something like, UN, are regional kind of headquarters. And that could also, because yes, sometimes it, what's needed is, global cooperation, but sometimes things can also, be done at the regional level. It's still, supranational in terms of
Supranational, sure.
yeah, but so right. I mean, there's no way that a single country can do it on its own as far as the major economic and environmental challenges that we face.
Yeah, and I think that if we could have somehow a collaboration, whether it is formalized in a diplomatic corps, or if it is collaboration of the economists and the scientists, working together in ways that come up with real viable and endeavors, right? I mean, we're going to have to do something to start presenting this and have it come at a trajectory that isn't expected. Because if we're going to wait on the governments to do it, we're obviously in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're already in trouble. We all understand the emergency here. I mean, to the point where it's really, really hard to contain the emphasis that needs to be put on it, okay? But I am a big believer in critical thinking and coming up with solutions and pitching them, because sooner or later, somewhere in this world, there is going to be a need emergently, an emergency, right? And a reactionary, oh my God, what are we going to do? And if the adults in the room have already been working on this and collaborating with folks, then you have some solutions that you can bubble up, hopefully, because somewhere along the line, there is going to be a desperate need for something that's not going to come out of a legislative body, because that's not what they do, right? And if we can endeavor to work that way, there's hope. I mean, it's just not a chicken and egg thing here, right? This is just go, work, collaborate, come up with the ideas. Sooner or later, something's got to give. I hope,
right.
Anyway. That's how I look at it.
Agreed. Well, Joe and I were talking on our previous conversation. We were both saying that we are so happy to see the interdisciplinary growth of modern money theory, and including the humanities. And I mentioned that William Sass, who is part of the Modern Money Network humanities division, he's a professor of rhetoric, and has written a book about the rhetoric of public policy. And I mean, you can just imagine with MMT, it's, ripe for all of the, budgetary politics and all that. But, and I guess, unemployment as well with the natural rate and all these kind of things. But, talking about diplomacy, how we communicate our ideas. And Joe had been mentioning how, some of the other MMT people, like, they kind of got into the framing. I forget is it George Lakoff or I forget. Anyway,
Yes, George Lakoff.
Yeah, about framing. So, there are times when, good ideas are rejected because they haven't been presented very well, and vice versa.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, because the framing hasn't been carefully studied in relation to what it might mean to certain parts of the public. And so there are very unexpected reactions to what you have to say, depending on how you frame it.
Right.
And so Bill Mitchell and Stephanie, and I think Randy as well, put considerable effort into studying the idea of how to frame the message, okay, of MMT. And that's one reason why the deficit myth has been so popular. I think that Stephanie was very successful in putting the right kind of spin on that framing.
Right. How to present it. Yep.
Yes, and she wrote that book over a very long time. She had started writing it actually when I got to know her in 2010, it seemed. She was trying out some framing ideas on her children, at that time. And so she took 10 years to write that book. Okay, and you can see the results of having spent a long period of time thinking of the framing, the proper framing. Okay, I have to admit that I don't spend a lot of time on my works. I mean, I write them. Okay, I like to think through the ideas and to solve the problem, from an idea point of view. But I've never been able to communicate, in the way that Stephanie communicates. It's, just marvelous.
It's a real skill. It's a real talent.
Yes, I know.
Absolutely. No doubt. Yeah, not my forte either, Joe.
When I first met her at the Fiscal Sustainability Conference in 2010, the one that you were supposed to be at, but could not come. She gave this presentation on the hierarchy, okay, of money.
Yeah.
And when I was hearing the presentation, okay, and absorbing it, the first thought that I had about it was that it was like fine crystal. The clarity of it was like fine crystal.
Okay.
I've always thought about her work in that way since that time. Just
very nice. Yeah. I'm trying to think what the analogy or whatever would be. What would be the other end of the spectrum from fine crystal? Like a lead balloon?
Red Solo cup?
Right, Dixie cup.
Red
Dixie
Solo
cup telephone, there you go.
Maybe chaotic communication. There are some people, whose communication is highly chaotic. Like, for example, Donald Trump. I mean, that's fine crystal at all. That's just a series, of disconnected thoughts.
It depends on your audience too, right?
Right. Very important.
That's the big one. And your audience is going to, I mean, when you're pitching to politicians, you've got to be ready for anything. You've got to be ready for any hole that they're going to poke into it, because there are going to be, like what we have right now, which is just obstructionism. Nobody wants to hear any solution, right? And so this is why we're stuck in this quagmire we're in right now. And when you're trying to pitch to some of that audience, you've got to be ready for, I mean, you have to be able to anticipate what the rhetoric is, the basic rhetoric is going to be. And then you have to understand whether or not it's willing to go down that rabbit hole, or if you're just going to present the next piece of the puzzle that may disarm the initial attack, right? But when you're talking to just peers, friends, neighbors, or whatever group it is that you're addressing, your students, right? That's a different audience. That's a different reception, okay? With a different mindset. And all of those audiences have presenters, right? And sometimes you can't present a high level political pitch to your audience that's there to talk to you because your friend's standing around a barbecue and something comes up about, well, what are we going to do about unemployment, right? And what are some ideas? So there's a place for everyone who has a knowledge base and ideas and who want to communicate ideas that have value and merit. And the only time we go sideways, I think, is when we get argumentative with each other, right?
Right.
Really. That's really it. That's where we fall off the rails.
Right.
Let us shift back a little now, I think. At least I'd like to see us shift back a little to the subject, of green jobs.
Right.
Okay. And so, Matt, can you talk more, please, about that?
So my definition of a green job is any job that does not harm the environment or that harms the environment less. So it doesn't have to be, which is what most people think of when they first hear green job. They think, oh, you have to work in the solar or you have to work in organic agriculture. What? No. Anything that is not increasing the environmental degradation, using up natural resources at a faster rate, right? If it doesn't do those things, right?
Or exploiting the population, right?
Green job. So
I mean, I love the idea of you saying that we could do that in healthcare and look at it as a green job, because that is a transitional plan for Medicare for all. Bingo.
Absolutely. I mean, education and health. I mean, the care. I mean, the whole. I don't like calling it industry, but the care sector. Absolutely. I mean, very early on. I mean, really early on, when we used to, sometimes people would ask questions. So what are these people going to do, in the job guarantee program? And Randy Ray would sometimes say, a job guarantee worker can hold the hand and listen to, an elderly or infirm, person. I mean, it's, yeah. I mean, the idea that we could not come up with things to do for the job guarantee jobs, that was one of the most incredible things, because usually people have ideas of things to do, but they say, well, we can't afford it. But to say that, like, oh no, I mean, I'm not worried about the how you're going to pay for it part, but what
What
would
are you
people
gonna do?
do? It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anyway,
There are so
yeah.
many things that we do now that might well qualify, okay, as green jobs, but we don't pay people to do them.
Yes.
True. Right.
And so one of the political problems involved in getting a job guarantee actually implemented and passed, okay, is to get people to accept the fact that the local communities that are administering the job guarantee program might want to define uh, certain activities that we engage in now for no pay as jobs, okay, that ought to be paid. And that's going to be controversial.
Right.
That's defining a framework, right? And then we'll pound that out. But it depends on who you delegate, who gets to define the framework, right?
Yes, it does. And also the political struggle involved in actually defining the framework. In other words, for example, and this, of course, is a classic example, if people stay home from work, to take care of their children, that job is very valuable from a societal point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a particularly damaging job from the environmental, or the green point of view. But of course, it's going to be very hard to get conservatives to accept the idea that childcare at home should be paid according to the job guarantee wage, which, according to MMT theory, should be a true living wage, a socially inclusive living wage. And that's going to be quite substantial today in many localities, okay, in many cities. Uh, for example, a socially inclusive wage, okay, in New York City is likely to be what? $28 an hour? Maybe $30 an hour? So it's going to be hard to politically define the framework. And maybe the definition of the framework is best left to local authorities because they understand the needs, okay, of local communities better.
Yeah, it's always been like a dilemma for me, because so take your example, you know child rearing and housekeeping. Like, on the one hand, I've said from the very beginning that I believe these should be job guarantee jobs.
Why?
And on the other hand, just as far as the issue of, like, paying a wage for, say for housework or child rearing, like, I always am hesitant to want to, like, expand the sphere of commoditization. I mean, so everything, becomes a commodity.
Yes.
Everything that has to be paid for. And, of course, I'm not saying that's why we should draw the line at, work that has disproportionately been done by, you know, by women and so on. So
I don't like the aspect of having to be told how I'm supposed to spend my time in my house and how I'm supposed to rear my children. That scares the hell out of me, to be honest with you. However, we have lots of people who are taking care of elderly family members, or
right,
going and volunteering to take care of the disabled on a regular basis, or just taking care of their neighbors because there is no one to check up on them. Okay, and that is an infrastructure that, if those individuals had the wherewithal, they would be paying for those services anyway. But there aren't enough of them.
right,
There aren't, and that idea to me makes a heck of a lot of sense. Growing trees as along with planting them, right? Teaching people that the skills of, how do we cultivate our environment from an ecological perspective, and then all of the research that could be done to solve these the contaminants, all of it, right? There's so many aspects of this that I mean, it's never ending in my opinion. I've got bridges in my hometown that are falling down, literally falling down, right? And why would a bridge fall down? They're supposed to be inspected every year. How does a bridge fall down? We've got lots of problems here, and they are obviously not well funded. And let's just be really honest. I mean, our regulatory agencies aren't being funded either. That's part of the problem
right,
here, right?
right,
So if they're going to continue on this path of decapitating or kneecapping our regulatory agencies, then we're going to have to figure out some way to hand that off, that funds that infrastructure outside of the agencies that are sitting there, and they can't act anyhow. I mean, that's a long plan. It's a long game. But sooner or later, what is going on right now, I promise, is not sustainable. And however we get to the other side, we're going to have to get there soon. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. So throw some stuff out. We have to start looking at this from, what are we going to do? What do we need to do? And then how does it fit into a Green New Deal? Because in that context, then people are able to start thinking about it in a mindset of, oh, okay, we have a jobs program. Well, what's the jobs program going to look like? Oh, well, we're going to have people go around and use asphalt and fill potholes. Yeah, no, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about coming up with ideas that are going to better what we need done and innovate, right? Because that's what we're lacking. We don't have any innovation in our policy anymore. We really don't. Oh, just give it to the corporations, which are going to try and do it cheaper and faster, not better. They're not innovating. They're trying to make as much money out of it as possible. But if you hand it over to the people who understand what those issues are, and they're well organized and ready, then we can get ideas coming out of it.
So
right.
specifically, Matt, what are your thoughts on the aspect of the job guarantee program that involves the participation of the members of the program themselves? In other words, some of the proposals, okay, for the job guarantee emphasize the idea that the people who enter the program will have a hand in defining the jobs that they're going to work at.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, not just that, but also I've thought that the program can be used to experiment with and try out different forms of organizing the workplace, different social relationships around the workplace, and including in decision making and so on, like, so that we could have, more cooperative endeavors. And in fact, one of the things I found out was that very early on in during the Great Depression, there were actually public sector cooperatives, and I mean, it's a great part of the history that's hasn't been. I don't know how much it's been explored, but I've always felt like that we can try out these things, and then from the job guarantee program, we could see them then spill over into the economy more generally. Similarly, with some environmentally sustainable technologies that people at first might, can we rely on solar for something as essential as, traffic lights, or, something like that, where kind of demonstration projects can help to familiarize people, and so that people become more comfortable, and communities will adopt, these cleaner technologies and so on. So, yeah, I mean, and of course, one of the ways in which this kind of general idea can be played out is in the actual determination of the activities of the program and the occupations in the program themselves. I think in other ways, the job guarantee program can serve as a kind of benchmark for the rest of the economy. So in the early days, we talked about how the job guarantee can be a vehicle for other social policies. So the minimum wage, obviously, that one, the job guarantee would become kind of the effective minimum wage. And if the job guarantee, came with healthcare, then, businesses in the private sector would have to match whatever is being offered in the job guarantee program, or possibly not be able to attract workers. So, other benefits, including kind of workplace governance issues, and all kinds of issues, surrounding kind of workplace democracy. So, yeah, I think it's tremendously exciting, area, and then also, with the environment as well. So, obviously, again, this is not, instead of the very important other steps. It's always, in my view, just about with any big goal, it's multi-pronged strategy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is this the place where the MMT world happens to meet the world, of Rick Wolf?
Right. With, you mean cooperatives and things like that?
The
Yeah.
democracy at work.
Yeah. For sure. I mean,
It makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I mean, these are all, like, I mean, for myself, like I was involved in all these other things we're talking about, before MMT. I got involved with MMT. So, like we're talking about, with environment and social justice, and that's one of the things that I'm really happy about is how the Green New Deal has come to be understood as including social justice, and it's not only about the environment, but of course, environmental justice and social justice are related and inseparable. So it's it's an exciting opportunity, I think, and uh, you know my son is very involved in the Sunrise movement in yeah, in the Kansas City area, and many other kind of activist involvements and everything. So I mean, I just get a lot from the young people, like, I mean, of course, all people, but, I really am encouraged, by what I'm seeing with, young people, because let's face it, our generation didn't do such a great
I know.
job, right? So, um, you know, we want to share our experience, um, but really, I'm uh, so encouraged by these kind of youth-led movements that we're seeing. I mean, look at Greta Thunberg and so many. I mean, when it comes to the environment, also, and so it's very reinvigorating.
At some point, yeah, we've got to come to an intersection there because, I mean, the kids know that their future depends on it, okay? And they
Right.
don't buy into the political rhetoric. They don't even listen to it. They're not, they don't watch TV. They get their information from sources, independent. They are very, very savvy. A lot of them in schools, a lot of the schools, the universities, and even a lot of the public school systems are doing a great job of raising the awareness for these kids, and they're coming out articulate, understanding, and looking for solutions, and looking to the adults to come, like, what are you doing? Come on, right? And so hopefully we can pass some torches in a policy and a governing sphere, because they need to pass. That torch needs to pass. This what we've got right now is not going to do it, and they're going to find out really fast that it's not going to work. That they don't even care. It's not on their agenda, and more people, our age and older, are starting to realize that. So I'm
Truly,
hopeful.
truly.
I'm really hopeful.
It may be time to look at some of the comments,
Sure.
see what folks have had to say, see their thoughts and their questions. So another agnostic said, I'm pretty convinced that an RBE proposed by Jacques Fresco is the only solution to this world's problems.
Resource-based economy, RBE.
Yes. Yes, exactly. In fact, Steve Wolfbrand asked that question. And so he got that reply. The way I'd address that is to say that if you were to follow the MMT approach and base your policies on the MMT lens and also the public purpose, it strikes me you would end up with a resource-based economy.
I think you're right. I mean, by default, because we're interdependent on one another. We can't just pretend that we're going to be able to do this sovereign by sovereign. We know that.
Yes, but then there's also the MMT perspective that what counts in the area, okay, of economic policy is the resources and how you use them. It's not the dollars per se that is significant. They're just a tool for getting there. But especially in an economy that has a monetary sovereign, the questions of the amounts you spend are not really in themselves important. What's important is how you use the resources. The resources are what's real, and it's how you use them to accomplish the public purpose of which is important. So I think if that's the case, you would end up with a resource-based economy, assuming, of course, that one of the main goals in your framework of public purpose is climate justice, environmental justice, ecological justice.
Prosperity for the people.
Yes, prosperity.
Right? I mean,
people.
We've got prosperity for corporations, but I don't think it's said enough in our political, from our politicians, that the people are what they put there to help prosper. I mean, we've been cut out down here.
Yes, we have been cut out down here, but though we want the prosperity for people, that has to be consistent with sustainability and the real resources that are available. So it's
well, because what I'm getting at, though, Joe, is that if we do not fix this situation that we're in, they will not prosper. I think that's part of what has got us to this, and is what has got us to this place.
That's right, and I think we agree entirely on that. We have gone off the track, especially with respect to allowing the development of inequality, okay, that we have, and the implications, okay, of inequality for the political system, for hamstringing the political system so that it cannot adapt to the real problems. When we let the inequality get too great at that time, because most people were looking at that from a narrow economic and neoliberal point of view, they never considered or talked about the feedback effect of the development of the kind of economic growth that they were supporting, okay, and they were getting on the political system. What that was going to mean for the political system in terms of hamstringing it.
Oh, I don't know, Joe. In some way, shape, or form, I believe that was the intent, right? That was the intention. That's how we got here.
I think you
can. I think they wanted to. I mean, they being the profiteers, right? The
Yeah,
stakeholders.
I think you can argue that was the intention, but okay, I think when you're arguing intentions, from a political aggregate point of view, the aggregate is made up of people who think differently and who do things actually from a diversity, okay, of motives. Yes, I'm sure there were some of the people who knew the direction things were headed in, and they were pleased by that, and they pushed for it, and even in some cases, they planned for it. Like, for example, Lewis Powell, in terms of the political work that he did on behalf of the corporations to get them to democratize things. So he was certainly behind that, and he pushed for that, and he helped also with his work on the Supreme Court, and he certainly was part of the trends towards corporate power and the inequality that we see now. But also, there were a lot of people who entered this, kind of an innocent way. I doubt, for example, that when Jimmy Carter uh, started to think about things in terms of his notions of fiscal responsibility, that he considered that maybe his notions of fiscal responsibility were incompatible with his own environmental and climate concerns. But I don't think that he thought those were in conflict.
Hmm.
So,
I think too, though, that back then it was a different. We weren't in the crisis we're in now, okay? And the function of the government was different. The policies were different. But I mean, I'm kind of relaying this to, you know, when I went and got back into school to get my business degree. It was mid '90s, and I'm opening up textbooks and reading that the only reason that a corporation exists is to make money for its stakeholders. And I was like, what do you mean? Where is that going to get you? Right? Oh no, that's the only reason that a corporation exists.
uh,
Who is responsible for being so narrow-minded and not having the vision of where that was going to land us? Because it was crystal clear to a lot of us. We were just like, are you kidding me? Where do you think this is going to end?
the corporate vision, the corporate visions of the 1950s and 1960s were not like that.
Exactly. We should have known better.
We should have known better. Indeed, I think there were a lot of us who did know better, but we lost. In other words, we lost, okay, in the political struggles of those times. But we knew very well that to make things all about the fundamentalism of the market and the single goal of profits, corporations, we knew that was not going to lead to any good place. We just lost.
Well, according to Milton Friedman, the social responsibility and only social responsibility of business is maximizing profits.
Mm. We all know
Where does
how
it
well
get
we
you?
love
Nobel
him.
Prize. Ah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, what is that? Again, here we are, right?
No,
I mean,
I know. It's
ugh.
unbelievable. But listen, I got to run. Did I maybe misunderstood the length of time? But there's so many other things I wanted to talk about. I might have to
Come
make a
back.
request that you uh, invite me back for a follow up
We would love
discussion.
to invite you back.
Yeah, because a
Please.
number of things have come up, that I'd like to discuss with you both, more. So hopefully we can
Would you
We would
like
love to have you back.
would you like to come back for next week's show?
Okay, I might have to talk to you about that, off the thing, but very possibly, yeah.
Okay, I think that would be good for us too. Okay, if you'd like to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
You mean same time, the live stream?
Same time, same station.
Okay, yeah.
Continue this conversation.
Okay,
That would be wonderful.
awesome. I'll confirm it with you after, but let's tentatively say yes.
Okay, that will
That'd be
be
great.
fine. And if next Monday is not all right, then
Tuesday, Joe.
we'll do it. I'm sorry, Tuesday. I keep forgetting it's Tuesday. I don't know why, because this is Tuesdays on Kerbero. So here we go. Okay, but anyway, if we can't do it next Tuesday, then we could certainly do it the Tuesday after that or the Tuesday after that.
Okay, great.
We can settle on some Tuesday.
Right. And like we talked about also on our other conversation, I have some people I'd like to recommend you consider having
That'd be
people,
wonderful.
lesser famous people,
Okay, lesser famous people. If you're
less
thinking,
famous people.
okay, if you're thinking, okay, of Sam Levy,
Well, he certainly won, but yeah.
okay,
Yeah, we'll take your
think
list for
great,
sure.
and I'd love to have him on, and I think that we can arrange it. And when we talked also last time, I think you mentioned a student of yours.
Matthew Robinson. I got a whole bunch.
Great.
Well, we can certainly have them on.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, because it's
Okay.
MM Tuesdays, and we have lots of Tuesdays coming up.
Great.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here.
Appreciate you both.
Okay, thank you,
You
Matt.
too.
Thanks.
Been a great pleasure. Okay, folks. Well, we'll take some more of your comments now. I think we still have some time. And somebody mentioned that Uganda just found $21 trillion worth of gold.
Uh-oh.
Okay, yeah, it was actually Go Start who mentioned that. So the thing, hashtag but liberate Uganda gold. Steve says that's a lot of gold. It is a lot of gold, but it's nowhere near the amount of dollars that a currency sovereign can generate. So another agnostic says that much gold would basically make it very cheap. Well, so what? It's just a commodity. Okay, it's not a currency with the authority of a government behind it. So Gostart says MMT plus the federal job guarantee equals all the things. Not too bad. Gostart said it looked like Joe just handed Lisa something. Lisa is in California, and I am in Virginia.
No, it's just the side by side. You reached, and I reached, and it looked like we were handing something off. I did see it. It was kind of funny.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that. That is kind of funny. Gostart points out Warren Mosler's been online lately. I very much like to get Warren on here, in the near future as well. And I think that's going to be coming up in the not too distant future, because I think he'll be interested in coming on also.
I'd love to have him on.
Teresa says, hello, everyone. Haven't lost your cane lately, have you, Matthew? Well, okay, I guess Matt's gone, so I guess hopefully he hasn't lost his cane lately. Teresa says, good to see you and hear you again. If you all have any more MMT conferences again, I renominate UMKC as the conference site. Yeah, they had a good conference at UMKC. If I recall correctly, that was the first conference. Because this is COVID's national emergency and Big Pharma got paid, but still no Medicare for all. And Gerstadt said, since Barack Obama legalized propaganda, facts don't matter. That's true for very many people, but for others of us, facts do still matter. And Gerstadt says, let's change taxpayer money to hashtag freedom funds. And Gerstadt says, we're up to 2.6 mass shootings per day, 311 total in 2022. Cases, it's been very dry here, so I'm glad there are no fireworks. Kostat says, with an FJG, we could all get paid to dig our own graves. That's a somber thought, Steve.
Yeah, we got to keep upbeat here. I'm fragile these days.
We try to keep upbeat here. And we try to stay in fighting mode, even when we're having fun. Kay says, well, guys, I'm out of here for tonight until we get the Fed to adapt. MMT, we are preaching to the choir. Okay, I love you all, though. We love you, Kay. Even though if you left, you can't hear us. Teresa says, well said, Lisa.
Thank you, Teresa.
And Steve says, AOC already allocated Omicron, but coffins.
Now, wait a minute. I got to interject here because I had a personal experience with this. What AOC did was she enabled people to apply who couldn't bury their loved ones because they couldn't afford it, and they got reimbursed for it. And we can beat up on our politicians all day long, but the woman,
yeah, but that was a very good thing to do.
It was terrific, and that woman was in tears when she got that check. So let's kind of lay off that one.
Yes, I think so too. And okay, I think in general that it's just a good idea to lay off the squad. Okay, the squad's been getting quite a lot, of hassling lately, and some of it is well deserved. But when it comes down to the bottom line, if they're not the best 6 people in Congress right now, then please mention another 6 who are as good, as they are. We have to keep that in perspective. Who are the other Congress people who care about their constituents as much as those 6 do? Okay, now I know their failures. I do a lot of preaching concerning that. But you always have to keep in mind the framework, and the context, and what the others are about, compared to them. At least I think you have to keep that in mind. Steve Prince says there are technologies that can save us: fusion energy, sand silos. Steve, I'm not familiar with sand silos. I'm familiar with fusion energy. And the reason why I have questions about that is I have questions about the social impact of the technologies we use. If there are certain technologies that are going to require heavy investments from the private sector and big companies, that is simply not good for democracy. And if we have other technologies that involve relatively small scale products that are locally based, that's much better from a democratic standpoint. So I think we always have to keep that in mind. Okay? The correct solution for survival here is not just one that meets the climate goals, okay, and the economic goals. But if it's to be sustained, it also has to meet the overriding goal of being good for people. And I'm not sure fusion energy does that. I'm not sure that the delivery of fusion energy, okay, is going to do that. Okay, I have an open mind about it, but I'm always skeptical, okay, of that side. Now, when it comes to sand silos, I don't know anything about them. So I'm certainly interested in hearing about them.
Is there a place for people to go for job opportunities that they can go online and see what's available?
Well, there are all kinds of things online, with respect to job opportunities, but whether those job opportunities fit people or not is a completely different story. The unemployment offices, okay, also, have jobs. They're advertising uh, some available jobs there. But if we had a job guarantee program,
Yeah.
then we would change the unemployment offices to actual employment offices. And that's actually a very, very fundamental thing we could do.
Joe, I have to, it would be very good for me if I excused myself a little bit early.
That's
I,
fine.
we have some guests that are coming for dinner, and if I could get a jump on what's coming in the next 20 minutes, it would do us all very good.
You mean what's coming over the next few days?
No, I've got 20 minutes that I might be able to get out in front of a flurry of activity.
Okay, so but if you'd like to leave now,
Yes,
that would
that's
be
what I'm
fine.
trying. That's
Continue.
what I'm doing. I'm trying to gracefully let you know that I am going to say goodnight.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody,
But
and
thank you very much for coming. Okay, and
always
but also good night, Lisa.
Good
good
night.
night. Good night, everybody. Good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Okay, well, that was a graceful exit, certainly. And so another agnostic says the money-based economic systems are a piss poor method of distributing resources. I think that depends on the political aspects of the money-based systems. I don't think it's a function of the money, okay, itself necessarily. But I think that's a big question, and that we won't get the solution to it here now. And Gostat says they're selling Zelensky Lego action figures with little Molotov cocktail Legos, and raised $160,000 for Ukraine. Okay,
That sounds terrible.
$160,000 for Ukraine to continue the war so the Ukrainians can fight, okay, until the last person. I'm not sure that's a good thing to do. I know that it may be well motivated, but I'm not sure that's a good thing to do at this point. looking at the larger context of all this. Steve Wolfbrand says, I would love to dig my own grave. I'm afraid I'd like to leave that to others. Teresa says, I am going to do like the people who celebrate Xmas 365 and making a sign in honor of the spirit of the original revolution. Viva la revolution. No taxation without representation. Thank you, Teresa. Jeffrey Denton says, well, I could see blaming the squad for the entire country being corrupt if the country actually were a democracy and it wasn't corrupt before they got there. But we don't know how pressured they really are. I suspect they're very, very pressured. And I doubt that they're very corrupt at all compared to the other people they are sitting with. Teresa says 50 state, 12 million peacefully dissenting. Ghostart says it would take roughly 11 million U.S. citizens to reach a critical mass tipping point. Probably would. That's not really that much. But we haven't been able to organize the 11 million yet. We need to try harder. Dolores says, good night, Lisa. Oh, Steve Wolfbrand says, sand silos are a way of saving solar energy. You mean storing solar energy? Then I guess I like the idea of sand silos. And Jeff Denton says, night, Fid, which was, okay, I think a nickname for Lisa in the Red Berets movement. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming. I've caught up with all the comments now. And hopefully we'll see you next week. And hopefully we can finalize Matt's coming. I'll take care of that as soon as we can because I want to have time, to decide on another guest if he doesn't want to come next week. Teresa says 11 million, 12 million, what's a million? I don't know. That depends. Steve says good night. Thank you for coming, Steve.